Hi there everyone and welcome back to the channel. So today I want to discuss how much you guys would be willing to pay for Battlefield 6, but more importantly how you want to go about paying for the game, looking at the pros and cons of different monetization methods developers deploy in their games. There's definitely a general trend in gaming at the moment with games becoming more and more expensive, with some next gen console games like Cold War retailing at £65 or dollars, and this price point is expected to become the new norm. Yet as players, the costs don't end there for us, and publishers further monetize their products post the game's launch. For AAA titles, there are really three main methods which developers deploy, which include DLC purchases, microtransactions and loot boxes, all of which have their pros and cons, although I think we can agree some by just about all measures are worse than others. I think then, although we may wish for different, Battlefield 6 will follow industry trends and retail around £65 to £70 and also include some form of further monetization once the game is launched. But what is our preference as players? Before we jump into it though, if you do enjoy, be sure to subscribe. We do everything Battlefield on this channel, so if you're a Battlefield fan, this could be the place for you. So the first strategy I wanted to look at is purchasable DLC content, and this is something we're very familiar with as Battlefield players through the premium service. So looking at the pros first then, is that we know DLC content purchases as a strategy is something DICE is familiar with, and if we look back to Battlefield 3, 4 and 1 when there was a premium service, I would say, although this is fairly subjective, the DLC content we got in those games was pretty strong. In addition, with DLC purchases and a premium service, there's a designated money pot for further content. So what do I mean by this? When as players we put £40 down for DLC content, it becomes very hard for DICE and EA not to produce that content due to the high price point we have already paid for as players. If you look back to Battlefield 5, which scrapped the premium service for a microtransaction model, which we'll look into a little bit more detail later, the major problem here was there just simply wasn't enough people purchasing cosmetic items, which resulted in a lack of content for Battlefield 5, and at the end of the day the game getting cut 2 years short. You have to remember DICE and EA are businesses, and if they're not further monetizing their game through those microtransactions, it becomes less of a priority for these companies to produce good or a large quantity of DLC content. To a certain extent, with the premium service, we know what we are paying for. It becomes a lot harder for DICE and EA to forego their obligations for DLC content when as players we put up £40 or $40. Whereas with microtransactions, it does become easier for the developers and publishers to worm their way out of providing us with good DLC content. Now, I would make the argument if we're paying £65 or £70 for a title, they should produce good DLC content anyhow, but at the end of the day, this is no longer the case for games, and we have to ground this in reality. So the downsides of a premium service then is it is probably the most expensive on us as gamers. Paying £70 and then in addition £40 for a premium service would make Battlefield 6 north of £100, which is exceptionally expensive for a single title. I think this price point would put off a lot of players, maybe not the majority, but a significant minority, with them feeling exceptionally disenfranchised with a game at that price point. In addition, paying for DLC content is definitely becoming a less popular strategy amongst developers. If you look at the major titles over the last few years, like Call of Duty or Fortnite or Apex Legends, all of which are BRs admittedly, but these are probably the games and titles that have had the largest player base. They've all monetized their games through microtransactions, but just because a strategy is less popular doesn't necessarily make it a negative. But this leads nicely onto microtransactions, and there's two types of microtransactions. Microtransactions through the purchases of cosmetic items, and what us gamers like to refer to as pay-to-win microtransactions. Now, I think it's so unlikely that Battlefield 6 and DICE and EA will implement pay-to-win mechanics in the game that I'm not even going to cover it. I think if they did this, it would be a complete disaster, and the game would probably flop from launch. So let's focus on microtransactions in terms of the purchases of cosmetics. The advantage to this is cosmetics are optional for us as players. So for those who want them, they can spend their hearts away on cosmetics and in turn fund further DLC content. But for those who don't have the money or simply aren't interested in cosmetics, they still get free DLC content for the base retail price of the game. As previously mentioned, it's also an exceptionally popular monetization strategy, not only amongst developers and publishers because of the potential for money making, but also amongst us as players. But the downside of microtransactions is it is the most risky strategy. If the cosmetic items are poor, or if the Battlefield fanbase just simply isn't that interested in cosmetic items, which is something yet to be tested, then it could result in a similar story to Battlefield 5, where simply people weren't spending money on microtransactions, DLC content was poor, and the life cycle of the game was cut short. Furthermore, a risk with the microtransaction monetization model is it's seen most success when it comes to battle royales. This may mean that DICE and EA are tempted to put more time and resources into a battle royale. Now, battle royale in Battlefield 6 is a complicated and controversial topic, and it's something we're not going to cover here. But I think what we can all agree on is the importance of DICE and EA to focus on the fundamentals of Battlefield multiplayer first before going on to make a good battle royale, hopefully, if they do it. Because microtransactions have seen most success in battle royale titles, DICE and EA may be tempted to put more time and resources into battle royale to capitalize on as much microtransaction and cosmetic purchases as possible at the expense of multiplayer. And this is something, as fans, I think we can all agree on is a big no-no. The final monetization strategy then is loot boxes, and there isn't much positive to say on this one. I think the only positive here is that they are optional. At the end of the day, we don't have to buy loot boxes as players, but the negatives far outstrip the positives. For one, it incentivizes gambling, and I know Battlefield is an 18+, but we all know that there are players that are younger than 18. And incentivizing gambling in these kind of games when we've already paid a retail price of £70 is morally questionable, to say the least. But moving morals aside, at the end of the day, loot boxes mean players don't know what they are paying for. All loot is random in loot boxes, which means as players we may end up buying loot box after loot box, hunting for that cosmetic item we wish to have in our arsenal and not finding it. And then finally, loot boxes are just generally hated by gamers. It's seen as exceptionally predatory, implementing loot boxes into AAA titles, and I just think it's the least optimal strategy for Battlefield 6's monetization post-launch. If I had to weigh up between microtransactions then and going back to a premium service, I think for me, I want to see premium come back. I just think with microtransactions, it's exceptionally risky. If people don't purchase the cosmetic items, it may result in a lack of DLC content that we saw in Battlefield 5. I also think with a microtransaction strategy, DICE and EA will be tempted to neglect multiplayer more so than they would have and focus on that battle royale. And I think with premium service, it's been tested with time. We've seen good content come out of the premium service before, and as I said previously, it's much harder for EA and DICE to wiggle their way out of producing this DLC content if we've all put up that upfront cost. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think there's going to be a BR? How do you think Battlefield 6 will be monetized? But on that note, thanks for watching, have a great day, and peace out.